I pray for you. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Let's continue here. Here the recognition of the pure and the impure is evident. If we say, this girl, beautiful as the sickle of the new moon, her limbs formed of honey and nectar, her eyes large as the petals of the blue lotus, seeming to refresh the living world with her coquettish glances, so that we may think that she has issued forth the moon, then what could be the connection of this body with that to which it is compared? Just so is that there is a misconceived idea of the pure and the impure. In this way, by showing the recognition of the pure and the impure, one sees that there is the misconceived idea of a merit, and there is only demerit, and of the useful, where there is only the useless. One of the problems that has occurred in society, and I'm sure you're well aware, is the level of and sense of irresponsibility that has arrived because of this calling everybody under 30 a child, when half the time you're not, and it's time to use terms that denote such accountability. I mean, there's other factors more, but honestly, that's one of them, because on some level you're thinking, oh, I'm a child, I'm not responsible. Similarly, Patanjali will describe the recognition of pleasure and pain in the words, by reason of the pains of mutation and of anguish and of subliminal impressions, and by reason of the opposition of the fluctuations of the aspects, guna. The discriminating all is nothing but pain. Undifferentiated consciousness is the recognition that there is pleasure in this pain. Likewise, the recognition of a self and the not self, either in external aids, whether animate or inanimate, are in the body as the seat of outer experience, or in the central organ which aids the self. This is the recognition of a self and the not self. In this sense, it has been said of this: he who counts any existing thing, whether phenomenalized or unphenomenalized, primary matter, as himself, or who rejects in the success of these tasya things, deeming it his own success, or agrees at the ill success of these things, deeming it his own ill success, these are all unenlightened. It is this fourfold undifferentiated consciousness which becomes the root of that unbroken series, santana, of hindrance, and of latent impression of karma together with its fruition. Santana dharma is a phrase that's used in connection to religion. Why? Because we shouldn't respect founders of religions in particular. At least not what they're doing there. Revivals of religion, okay, that's one thing, but founders of religions, they're obviously making it up, or they're taking it from something other than God that has made it up. And this undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, precisely as in the case of a foe, a mitra, or of a trackless forest, a gospada, is to be conceived as a really existing object. Vastusa tattva. Just as a foe, a mitra, is not a negative fiend, and not something amounting to a friend, but the opposite of this friend, a rival, so too a trackless forest. A Gospoda is not a place not visited by cows. Gospoda, a bhava. Nor again is it merely a quantity of land which has a cow's foot as its measure, but so the contrary. It is nothing less than the definite place, a different thing, other than these two, and the opposite of a cow's footprint. Precisely so, undifferentiated consciousness is not a source of valid ideas, nor the negation of a source of valid ideas, but another kind of thinking, the reverse of knowledge. 5. The recognition of the permanent, or the pure, a pleasure, and of a self in what is impermanent, impure, pain, and not self is undifferentiated consciousness. The word effect is a qualification which serves to indicate the impermanence, some idea deeming the elements permanent and longing to attain the form of these, pay devotion even to these, thus deeming the moon and the sun and the stars and heavenly regions permanent. In order to attain these, they pay devotion to the patha, that is the way of the fathers and the way of the entities that are considered gods. Shayateen, min, jinn, if they are gendered entities, which begin with the smoke. Similarly, deeming the celestial beings, that is, the light beings, to be deathless, they drink soma in order to reach their condition. Okay, if soma is mashed up marijuana sprinkled with opium and ephedra, again, we're talking shayateen, min, jinn, the fire beings. It is in this recognition of the permanent and impermanence that is undifferentiated consciousness. Likewise, in the impure and highly repulsive body. Why you have to hate the body, man? Love your own body. Yeah, we're given these vessels for our use, When the sentence is only half finished, he recites a stanza, gatha, from Vyasa, to show the repulsiveness of the body. The words are, because of its first abode. See, this is misogyny that you'll find in most spiritual paths. But look at what feminism does for the women, the rape rate and the rate of abuse. So being imbalanced is going to create problems each way. The abode is the mother's womb, polluted by such things as urine. The seed is the mother's blood and the father's semen. The sustenance is formation into juices of the food eaten and drunk, for by it the body is held together. Exudation is sweet, and death defiles the body of even a scholarly man, inasmuch as a bath is required after his dead body is touched. An objector might say, if the body is impure, there is no use in cleansing it with earth and with water. To this he replies, because it needs cleansing it with earth and water. Because it needs constant cleaning. Although the body is naturally impure, purification must be applied to it, just as women produce fragrance by applying ointments to the body. Well, if the ointments don't have the fragrance, obviously they're producing their own fragrance, aren't they? are they causing reactions that causes a smell? He completes the half-finished statement by saying, here in the impure. The meaning is that the impure on the grounds stated before. He describes the recognition of purity in the impure by the words, the new. Coquettish, that is, which is playful, as the result of an erotic mood. What could be the connexion of the highly repulsive body by a highly remote mandatama similarity with such a thing as the sickle of the new moon, in this way by showing the recognition of purity in the impure body of a woman, where there is only demerit, is in the ease of murder. Hinsa, there is the discovery of an idea of merit in things which liberate from the round of reverse. Similarity in case of a thing is useless, such as money, because of the amount of pains required for getting it and keeping it. It is explained that there is a discovery of the idea of the useful and the useless. All these, in that they are abhorrent, are impure. Similarly in pain. Easy. Likewise in the not-self. Easy. It was Panchachika who spoke of this in the way the phenomenalized primary matter is the animate, such as sons or wives or cattle. The unphenomenalized is the inanimate, such as beds or seats or food. These, sa, are all unenlightened, and that is stupid. It is called the fourfold, chatushpada, because it has four parts, pada, four places where it becomes phenomenalized. It might be objected, there is also another kind of undifferentiated consciousness, which has its object such states as loss of the sense of orientation, or as the sight of the firebrand whirled about so as to be seen as a circle. Undifferentiated consciousness has, therefore, an indefinite number of parts. Why then say that it is fourfold? In reply to this, he says, the root of that, there may be also, of course, other undifferentiated consciousnesses. But the undifferentiated consciousness, which is the seed of the round of rebirths, has only four parts. An objector says, undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, might be a negative termination, compound, non samasa, in which case, 1. The first member might be determinative, pradhana, for example, without flies, amaksika, or the final member might be determinative, for example, a king's officer, a Raja Purusa. Or the compound might have a third thing as determinative, for example, a flyless place, a maksika decha. This being the situation, if we suppose that the first member is determinative, an undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, would be then understood as a negation whereto an affirmation is expected, prasadya, pratisada, and this, a kind of negation, could not be the cause of such things as hindrances. Or, if we suppose that the final member is to be the determinative, then it is undifferentiated consciousness that is to be particularized by the negation of something, and this kind of undifferentiated consciousness would be destructive of such things as hindrances, and not the seed of them, because it would be conscious of the absence of something. For it cannot be that the member subordinate guna to the determinative pradhana member of the compound should break down that determinative. Therefore, in order to make sure that it does not break down the determinative, something irregular, that is, the absence of something, must be supposed. on the other hand, to be found in the subordinate member of the compound, accordingly in order that the differentiated consciousness as such should not be broken down. Another meaning must be given to the negative, or another negative must be supplied. Or if we suppose, on the other hand, that another thing be the determinative to the compound, we should have to say that undifferentiated consciousness is a state of mind, buddhi, in which knowledge, vidya, does not exist, and that could not be the seed of such things as the hindrances merely insofar as the absence of knowledge. For then a similar state of things would also have to be admitted in the case of that form of undifferentiated consciousness which is attained in the restriction when preceded by discriminative discernment, since here too there is absence of knowledge. Accordingly, in all these three ways, it has been shown that undifferentiated consciousness is not the root of such things as the hindrances. In reply to this, he says, and this has a really existing object is the state of existence of a real object, that is to say, that is, really existing objectivity. So in this way, it is evident that undifferentiated consciousness is neither a negation whereto an affirmation is expected, prasadya pratiseda, nor again nothing but a defective kind of knowledge, nor even is it a state of mind characterized as being the absence of this, and that is knowledge, but undifferentiated consciousness is described as being misconceived thinking, the opposite of knowledge, vidya, for the relation of the word and the thing is determined by confirming the usage of the world, and because accordingly to the usage of the world, even a compound whose final member is determinative and which is a negative compound, and which suppresses upamardaka, the thing to be described by the last word of the compound, is now and then found, in a sense contrary to this final member, as determinative, and at the same time suggested by this final member. There is therefore, in this case, also an expressive meaning, vritte, in the sense of being contrary to this knowledge. He analyzes the example, just as a foe, a mitra is not. A foe is not a negative friend, nor again amounting to a friend. Supply at this point in the text some other thing, but the approach of this, a rival. So too, a trackless forest is not a negative cow's footprint, nor again is it merely a quantity of land which has a cow's foot as its measure, but as the contrary, nothing less than a spacious place, the opposite and extent of a cow's foot, and other than the two negative, agospada, that is, without footprints of the cow, and not a cow's footprint, would form together at the first negative cow's footprint, and land covered by a cow's footprint would form the second negative cow's footprint, and in fact a different thing altogether, the trackless forest. He applies this to the matter in hand, which he is illustrating with the words, precisely so. 6. When the power of seeing and the power by which one sees have the appearance of being a single self, that is, the feeling of personality. The self is the power of seeing. The thinking substance is the power by which one sees. The hindrance called the feeling of personality is a change by which these two appear to become a single essence. Starupa. When there is any kind of failure to distinguish him who has the power of the enjoyer from that which has the power of being enjoyed, which are as distinct as possible and as confused as possible, enjoyment is ready at hand. But when each has recovered its own essence, there is isolation. How is it that at that time could there be anything that could be called enjoyment? In this sense, it has been said, he who should fail to see the self other than the thinking substance, distinct in nature and in character and in consciousness and in other respects, would make the mistake of putting his own thinking substance in the place of that self. Having said that undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, is the cause, he says that the feeling personality is the effect, which in its turn is supreme, varista, ever passion and other hindrances. 6. When the power of seeing and the power by which one sees, having the appearance of a single self, the feeling of personality. And people who make, circumambulations, you're dealing with the personality symbolically. The seeing and that by which one sees are precisely the two powers of the two, invoking for counterclockwise, evoking for clockwise. The seeing and that by which one sees are precisely the two powers of the two, the self and the not self, that undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, which is characterized as being the perception of a self and what is the not self, in which has the appearance of being a single intended object, but which, in the strict sense, is not a single self. This avidya is the feeling of personality. Instead of saying of seeing and of that by which one sees, he uses the words power of, in order to indicate the relation between them, and that is the capacity to be an enjoyer and to be objects to be enjoyed. He remember all those lectures? It's like, oh, the problem with life is that women nowadays, they're wanting to enjoy themselves and they're meant to be the enjoyed. It's like, well, you're kind of both. And men aren't just the enjoyers, men are enjoyed too, so that's not. He elaborates the sutra by saying the self, it might be asked, why, since they are perceived as identical, should they not be identical, and why should the appearance of unity hinder the self? In reply, he says, he who has the power of the enjoyer, and that which has the power of being enjoyed, he who has the power of the enjoyer is the self. That which has the power of being enjoyed is the thinking substance. These two are as distinct as possible. If it be asked, whence comes this distinction? The reply is, as unconfused as possible. Immutability and other qualities are the properties of the self. Mutability and other qualities are the properties of the thinking substance. Thus, there is no confusion. And thus, by these words, it is asserted that the identity, although presented as an idea, is not in the strict sense real. The words failure to distinguish state the fact that hindrances exist. Like finding confusion where there is no inherent confusion. After having given an affirmative line of reasoning, he states a negative line of reasoning. In the words, its own essence, the recovery is the discriminated discernment. That another also holds the same opinion. He says in the words, in this sense, it has been said by Panchachika that the thinking substance in nature means its own self, which is at all times, whatever pure of aspects, guna, in character means its detachment, in consciousness means its intelligence, chaitanya. Whereas the thinking substance is pure and not detached, and inanimate, jaga. Undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, is the mental state with regard to these two, to the effect that they are one self. The mistake is a subliminal impression generated by a previous undifferentiated consciousness, or else it is the tamas quality, because undifferentiated consciousness is tamas. Now, how does that connect to the name Thomas? But, anyways, or maybe it doesn't at all. 7. Passion is that which dwells upon pleasure. That greed or thirst or desire on the part of one's acquaintance with pleasure, ensuing upon a recollection of pleasure. For either the pleasure or for the means of attaining it. It is passion. Remember, Surah 102, is it? That ends, you got, because you got belief, you got faith, you got knowledge, and of course, before that, you have disbelief, or, well, maybe not even before that, but we're going to be asked about our pleasure. When one feels the discrimination, such states as passion cease. So the feeling of personality brought to pass by undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, is the root, nidana, of such states as passion. Accordingly, direct as the feeling of personality, he gives the distinguishing characteristic of passion, and of the rest of the hindrances. 7. Passion is that which dwells upon pleasure. Since memory of pleasure is impossible in the case of one unacquainted with pleasure, the text says, acquainted with pleasure. Passion for a recollected pleasure ensues upon recollection of pleasure. But while pleasure is in experience, there is no need of recollection. Since, however, the means of attaining pleasure are either remembered or perceived, the passion must ensue upon a recollection of pleasure. And even when the means of attaining pleasures are to be perceived, it is only after remembering that one of the same kind is the source of pleasure, and that he infers that there is one source of pleasure insofar as it is the same kind. After this follows the desire. He explains the words, dwells upon, by the words of that. Now we can know of pleasures that we do not experience by the pleasures that we do experience. I mean, we all have bodies. We all sort of know what, at least the skin and whatnot of completely feels like. So, we can look at, for example, the drug-like highs that occur in ritual. You don't have to get high on the drugs because the chemicals that are reacted upon by using drugs, or the mimicking of those chemicals, happens without the intoxication, without the unnecessary harm and whatnot that can arise from these things. So, okay. We've got over 50 chemicals to work with, by the way. 8. Aversion is that which dwells upon pain. That repulsion or wrath or anger on the part of one acquainted with pain, ensuing upon a recollection of pain, for either the pain or for the means of attaining it, is aversion. 9. Aversion is that which dwells upon pain. The words acquainted with pain are to be explained as in the previous sutra. He explains the words dwells upon by the word that. Repulsion in the sense that it repels, the same he elaborates by synonyms. For instance, wrath. 9. The will to live. Benevecha, sweeping on by the force of its own nature, exists in this form, even in the wise. In all living beings, this craving for oneself ceaselessly rises. May I not cease to live. May I live. This craving for oneself does not arise except in one in whom the experience of death resides, and from the existence of this hope, the experience of other births is made clear, and this is that well-known hindrance called the will to live. This fear of death, inconceivable as a result of either perception or inference, our verbal communication, sweeping on by the force of its own nature, as a vision of extermination forces the inference that the pangs of death have already been experienced in previous births, and just as it is evident that this fear is to be found in the unspeakably stupid, so also as in the wise, had the same understanding of the prior limit of human lives, that is the round of births, and of their final limit, that is isolation. Why this? Because the subconscious impression, the result of the fear of death, is alike both fortunate and unfortunate. Now, something I would pray for, do ritual for, whatever you want to call it, for myself or others, is not, oh, well, help them, not a long life, not wealth. It's, may they die in their best spiritual state. May they be liberated from unlawful spending and earning. May they be may they stay alive as long as it's good for them. It's about people's spiritual states and the situations that will benefit them. It's not anything like that. So, 9. The will to live, sweeping on, its own nature exists in this form, even in the wise. He discusses the meaning of the term will to live in the words all living beings. This craving for one's self is the longing for one's self expressed in the words, may I not cease to live, that is, may I not become non-existent, and also expressed in the words, may I live, that is, may I be alive, divyasam. The longing for oneself is not possible unless the living creature have had residing in him an experience of death. It is he only that has this craving for himself, that is, the will to live, the fear to death. In the course of the discussion, prasangatas, he refers by the words, and from the existence of this, to a heterodox person, Nastika, who denies that there is another birth. From the fact that the present body is being held together, it follows that there is experience of a previous birth. In other words, a birth is a conjunction of the soul with the body and sense organs, feelings which are different from those of any previous conjunction, and are characterized by the definite location in that collection. Why is it happening once necessitate that you've gone through it again? This birth is experienced or attained, and this is the experience or attainment that is made clear. How is this? In reply he says, and this is that well-known will to live. Breaking off of the sentence in the middle, he tells of its hindering character in the word hindrance. This will to live is called a hindrance because that is pain. A living creature with unkindly actions and the like. And I guess I'm going to have to stop there. Namaste.